In March 1946, former British Prime Minister Winston Churchill delivered a speech in Fulton, Missouri, that would become one of the most famous in history. He declared that an Iron Curtain has descended across the continent, describing the growing division between the Western powers and the Soviet-controlled Eastern Europe. Churchill's Iron Curtain speech vividly highlighted the emerging geopolitical landscape and set the stage for the ideological battle that would define the Cold War. This metaphorical curtain symbolized the stark division between the democratic nations of the West and the communist regimes of the East. Welcome back to our journey through the Cold War. Today, we'll explore the impact of the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan on US-Soviet relations, the significance of Cominform, Comecon, and NATO, and the dramatic events of the Berlin crisis. In 1947, President Harry S. Truman announced a foreign policy that would become known as the Truman Doctrine. This policy aimed to contain the spread of communism by providing political, military, and economic assistance to countries threatened by Soviet influence, notably Greece and Turkey. Following closely, the Marshall Plan was unveiled. Named after Secretary of State George C. Marshall, this initiative provided over $12 billion to help rebuild Western European economies after the devastation of World War II. The goal was not only economic recovery, but also to prevent the spread of communism by stabilizing these nations. The Soviet Union viewed these actions with suspicion and hostility. They saw the Truman Doctrine and the Marshall Plan as direct threats to their influence in Europe, deepening the ideological divide between East and West. Stalin would refer to the Truman Doctrine as dollar imperialism, and he forbade any country in Eastern Europe to apply for aid through the Marshall Plan. In the view of Soviet officials, these American policies only reinforced the warnings issued in the Novikov telegram. In response to the Marshall Plan, the Soviet Union established Cominform in 1947. The Communist Information Bureau aimed to coordinate actions between communist parties under Soviet direction. Its aim was to establish trade links between communist countries and increase the output of heavy industry within the Soviet Union. This also involved strict censorship of all media in the countries in Eastern Europe that had fallen under Soviet control. 2 years later, in 1949, the Soviets founded Comecon, a Council for Mutual Economic Assistance. This was an economic organization designed to administer the Soviet Union's own economic revival plan, the Molotov Plan, and counter the effects of the Marshall Plan in Eastern Europe. At the Potsdam Conference, it had been agreed that Germany and Berlin would be split into 4 zones, each governed by a member of the wartime Grand Alliance. This division was intended to be a temporary measure while a new German government was created. However, the growing tensions between the West and East made it difficult to decide how best to treat Germany. The Soviet Union remained committed to extracting as much financial compensation as possible, whilst the Western Allies sought to ensure Germany remained strong and able to resist communism. In 1948, the United Kingdom, USA and France combined their zones into what became known as Trizonia. Not only did this combine the administration of the zones, it also included the creation of a new currency, the Deutschmark. Stalin was infuriated by what he saw as a breach of the agreement at Potsdam, which had not contained any provisions for a separate administration or currency in Germany. In response, Stalin ordered the entirety of West Berlin to be blockaded and therefore deny the Western powers access to the city. This became known as the Berlin blockade. Reluctant to use military force to break the blockade, the Allies instead launched the Berlin airlift, a monumental effort to supply West Berlin by air. For nearly a year, planes delivered food, fuel, and other essentials, demonstrating the West's commitment to defending the city. The Berlin airlift was a success, and in May 1949, the Soviets lifted the blockade. This crisis solidified the division of Berlin and Germany itself. A major consequence of the Berlin blockade was the realization amongst many Western countries that the threat of communism could not be ignored. Shortly after the blockade was lifted, in April 1949, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, was formed. This organization relied on the concept of collective security. If one member state was attacked, all other member states would come to their aid. At its heart, NATO was primarily concerned with countering Soviet aggression. The original member states included USA, Canada, Britain, France, Belgium, Holland, Luxembourg, Norway, Iceland, Denmark, Italy, and Portugal. The USA could now legitimately place nuclear warheads in other NATO countries as a means of countering any future Soviet nuclear threat. Furthermore, shortly after the blockade ended, two separate German states were officially formed. In the West, the Federal Republic of Germany, FRG, was established, aligning with the Western Allies. In the East, the German Democratic Republic, GDR, was created under Soviet influence. The Truman Doctrine, the Marshall Plan, Cominform, Comecon, NATO, and the Berlin Crisis all played crucial roles in shaping the early Cold War period. They set the stage for the profound ideological, political, and military struggles that defined the second half of the 20th century. Join us in the next episode as we explore the formation of the Warsaw Pact and the events of the Hungarian Uprising. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to subscribe, like, and leave a comment. It all really helps the channel out.